Welcome everyone. Just want to make sure we're in the right room. We are in how we got hit with ransomware and best practices for prevention. Is that what you all expected to be in? Fantastic. We've got a great presentation here for you. We have Troy from Backblaze, and we have Matt Woodruff from Jamf to speak with you. Matt, I'll just hand this mic off to you. After the presentation, we'll take time for Q&A. At that point, if we run out of time, if you have more questions, Troy has generously volunteered to be at the back of the room to address any questions that you may have. So without further ado, let me bring Troy and Matt up to address how we got hit with ransomware and best practices for prevention. Come on up.
Thank you, sir. All right, my partner in crime is just out there getting
Yep, I'm coming.
Mic.
Sorry.
Are you coming, Matt?
I'm coming.
Look, if I have to do it solo, I will, but I kind of wanted you to help me out today. Yeah, so thank you so much for the introduction. My name is Troy. I run the solutions engineering team at Backblaze, which means I work with end users, helping find solutions to solve problems that they have, right? Matt works on the security side, so I want to lean on him for some security expertise, specifically maybe talking about Jamf Protect. Yeah?
Yep, Jamf Pro, Jamf Protect, but yeah, I'm the lead security solutions architect at Jamf, so I'm assisting Troy today, and he's the main star of the show.
So, as you guys heard, our topic today is talking about how we, Backblaze, got hit by ransomware. It's not something a lot of companies like to talk about. You know, it's in the news a lot, unfortunately. It's become kind of this not if, but when kind of scenario. So I want to walk you through what happened with us. Kind of want to give you an overview of, you know, high level vulnerabilities, solutions that are out there that exist to help you either recover from or protect yourself against ransomware. Also, I kind of want to look at the past when we got affected versus now. What threats are out there now? What do we have to think about as we go forward, kind of in this, you know, new world of attackers and how to be prepared for that. And then, of course, we'll do Q&A. So let me take you on a journey with me way back, pre-pandemic, to 2015. So 2015, Backblaze was hit with ransomware. We wrote a blog about it. We've been very open about it. I know all of you are great blog subscribers. Thank you so much for keeping tabs on us. But it's something we've always been open and upfront about. CryptoWall, which was the ransomware du jour back in the day, had cost users up to $325 million. And even at that point, ransomware had kind of yet to dominate the news. And so how did this affect Backblaze, right? It started with an email, phishing, right? An email that looked legit. Someone clicked on a link. Her name was Ellie. And she still works at Backblaze. And she's never opened an email attachment since this day. She opened this attachment. She learned her lesson. But, you know, right before she was about to head home, after she'd opened the attachment that day, she opened an email. There was a voicemail attached to it. And, you know, she worked in accounting, and it said it was from QuickBooks. So she's like, oh, I got a call from QuickBooks. I need to listen to this, right? But the message didn't play. And so she went about her day, started packing up. She was just about to shut down her computer when she noticed something odd. So the background picture, which was one of her daughters. This is not her actual daughter. This is stock footage, right? But it was gone, and it was replaced by a generic image of flowers. And she was like, wait, that's not right. And then she glanced at the folder on her desktop and had all the images in it. She expected to see all the images, but unfortunately, this is what she saw. A bunch of files that had been somehow transformed, right? After this, she saw this lovely message, which maybe the animation will play or not. Maybe I have to hit play again. There it is. Congratulations. You're our latest victim. So she called over our CTO, Brian Wilson, one of our founders, and he immediately asked her if she had opened any attachments. So once he confirmed that she had just opened an attachment, they ripped out the computer from the network, right? Detach it from the Wi-Fi, shut it down, shut the whole thing down. Tried to stop the spread, right? Then, next step was he took the drive physically out of her computer and put it in a sandbox where it was able to kind of finish doing its work, okay? So he knew that the first step was to get that infected computer off of the network to help stop the spread. This is like super important, right? You don't want it to go anywhere else. And once this was done doing its thing in the isolated sandbox, that's when this message came up about congratulations about being the newest victim. So at this point, we had a couple options, one of which was to pay the ransom, right? That is what the point of ransomware is, to get you to typically send some cryptocurrency to one of the creators of the ransomware, right? The other, which is the route that we took, was to wipe the drive, wipe the computer, and restore the backup from their Backblaze backup, from Ellie's backup. So Backblaze, if you're not aware, we are a backup company. We've been around for 18 years. We make computer backup software that backs up to our cloud, not someone else's cloud. It's not AWS on the back end. It's our hardware, our software, right? So it's a client that backs up to our cloud, keeps all versions of your files. It's unlimited storage. And because all Backblaze employees get Backblaze backup as part of being an employee, all of Ellie's files, including her QuickBooks files, were all backed up to Backblaze, and we're able to pull those down and restore them into place. So, in this case, I think we were really, really lucky. We were really lucky for a couple reasons. One, we had a backup. Two, we were able to stop the spread. We did not have, luckily, any spread of the infection across our network to other machines. And, before that day, we all knew that ransomware was a possibility. But it really made us think about, in real-world terms, how do we react when this happens? Up to this point, we hadn't done things like tabletop exercises or yearly reviews of a disaster recovery plan. And really, this was what made us kind of change our thinking around how to plan for and how to react to a ransomware attack. So Matt, I want to kind of bring you into the conversation a little bit.
Sounds good.
In your experience, how have you seen companies react to when they're hit by ransomware?
Yeah, there's usually an immediate, I don't know what to do right now kind of situation, because you don't know exactly why or how that particular hacker is hitting a particular network, device, or user. Because usually there's 3 different vectors to which you can spread at that moment, whether it hits the network, or they go to the user and the cloud identity of that user and they want to spread through that paradigm, or in the end, device. And they're just focused on the data-rich nature of, hey, there's something on this device, they're encrypting it for a reason, let me go find it.
Yep.
And so that's usually what happens. Is there's a lot of investigations that tend to happen right off the bat.
Yeah, I'm guessing most folks are not as lucky as we were in this instance.
Oh, absolutely correct. Yeah. Though corporately, backup has gotten better.
Yeah.
Organizationally, in fact, I bet I could ask this room alone how many do backups. But more importantly, how efficient are your backups? How satisfied are you with disaster recovery after it happens? Those scenarios is what Backblaze is all about, is making sure that those scenarios have been tested, verified, they work on the operating systems that they're on. But those are the scenarios to which it can be concerning at times.
Yeah. And I think up until this point, Backblaze as a company, we had thought about, ransomware. Again, this is 2015. This is the old dark times, right? Not necessarily the impact that ransomware could have on our specific business. And I think that kind of naivete a lot of folks have until they have personal experience with it, right? So it was a big learning experience for Backblaze. And we implemented some things in our business to help us, not for if it happens again, but for when, okay? So you can kind of see here kind of a few things that we implemented as a result of our experience. So endpoint detection and response, obviously a really, really important factor in, maybe not protecting, you can still get hit even if you have endpoint detection, but I think stopping the spread is where that really comes into play. And having something that can detect malicious payloads I think is really important. Having multi-factor authentication and enforcing that. Believe it or not, we did not have enforced MFA back in 2015. We sure as heck do now. I have a YubiKey on my keychain in my pocket here. But having a secondary authentication is really important, right? And I think doing something like a physical key is usually the safest. If a system is compromised, there are tools that can be used to pull user accounts and passwords from memory. So, only allowing authorized applications, either from the OS or third-party software, that could be really important as well. Trying to limit access, the rule of least access, right? No one having access to systems that they don't necessarily need to, and understanding what really do folks need. So up to this point, I don't mind sharing, our back-end tools just about everyone in the company had access to, and really this was an inflection point for Backblaze where we had to take a look and say, hey, who really needs to have access to things like being able to see the number of files in a customer's backup, right? Does a salesperson really need to know that? Probably not, right? Oh gosh, it's so small. I should have worn my glasses. Yeah. Oh my goodness, making it bigger for me. Thank you. So we also implemented a very strong vulnerability management program. So we do these static analysis security tests that focus on looking for vulnerabilities in our source code. So we're not only looking from an endpoint standpoint, we're looking at our product as well, because we have identified, hey, if our environments can be attacked, our products can as well. So I mentioned this was like an inflection point, not just for us as a
If we can get another lavalier up here, please.
dead battery. All right, I'll take the handheld. Thank you. I'll just hand it to you. Have I mentioned that I love doing live presentations? Yeah, so it was really an inflection point for us, looking at not just our endpoint protection, but the protection of our application as well, and making sure that we were implementing it in a secure way that was thoroughly being tested. I talked about least privilege, vulnerability management program. Oh, bug bounty program as well. That was part of also that process of us ensuring that we had as many eyes on our software as possible. So we have a bug bounty program where we publicly pay out folks that report vulnerabilities within our application. So I know not for everyone here, most folks here probably don't have their own applications, but we really took this to heart as an opportunity for us to really, look in the mirror and make sure that we were protecting ourselves as best as possible. So since that attack many years ago, ransomware has continued to evolve, right? $70 million in lost revenue, okay? Gosh, I can't read these numbers. You can see them up there. They're much larger for you than they are for me on this little screen. But really, the attack on Backblaze was pretty amateur, right? And that was 9 years ago, in the dark times. So when we're thinking about ransomware today, in 2024, phishing is still the most common line of attack, what we fell for back in the day. Having proper training for employees, we actually do mandated training at Backblaze twice a year, and every month or two, we do a phishing test, essentially, where our IT team sends out fake phishing emails to see who falls for it, right? And it's a way to help us keep our minds sharp, make sure we're continuing to be educated, and keeping up to date with what the most recent tactics that, the bad guys are out there using. So there are other factors, including supply chain attacks, right? So for example, there was this very large ransomware attack called NotPetya in the spring of 2017, and this was the largest cyber attack in history, which I bet a lot of you probably haven't heard a ton about. So it's a really, really interesting story. There was a group within the Russian military intelligence known as Sandworm that targeted this Linkos group accounting software, Maersk, which is kind of like their version of QuickBooks. It's like the Ukraine version of QuickBooks or TurboTax. So even before the ground combat, Russia and Ukraine were engaged in back and forth. And this infected over 300 organizations, including Ukrainian government, Ukrainian post office, banks, ATMs, hospitals, and not just Ukrainian companies, multinational companies as well, including companies like FedEx. And this attack was estimated to have $10 billion, billion with a B, in damage. And it started like this. A financial executive in Odessa is on Ukraine's Black Sea coast, asked IT admins to install an accounting software called MEDoc on a single computer. Kremlin-linked hackers called Sandworm, compromised the doc update server, and then sent this NotPetya malicious payload to all the computers. So just one install caused all this damage. NotPetya was propelled by two powerful hackers and exploits working together. One was this penetration tool known as Eternal Blue, which was actually an NSA tool, interestingly enough, that was leaked by shadow brokers on the dark web. And I can get into specifics, but and then the other one was this one called Mimikatz. That was a proof of concept created by a French security researcher. So these were two tools that some bad guys used. The tools were made to do good things by good actors that were leaked out into the rest of the world for bad guys to use. Unfortunately, Maersk wasn't using multi-factor authentication, so they weren't protected there. And the hackers were able to access the user IDs. And because they had the passwords, they had the ability to propagate this throughout the network unfettered. And I think the craziest part of this story is how they were able to recover. And if you haven't heard this, I promise you it's pretty crazy. So Maersk had an Active Directory server, a domain controller, in a data center in Ghana that was offline when this happened because the data center was having power issues. So not only was the power down, the redundant power was down in this data center in Ghana. And that, because it was completely offline, Maersk was able to recover their environment from that one domain domain controller because it didn't get infected because it was completely offline. So anyway, I think understanding how these attacks work and seeing, hey, it's not just multinational companies, it's not just small companies, it's not just medium companies, it's not just Backblaze, it's not just you guys, it's everyone, right? Everyone will be affected by ransomware at some point. So having a backup is such a key part of that strategy. There's a lot of resources out there to help protect and prepare for ransomware. There's guidance from the White House, NIST, CISA, right? All these folks have a lot of good stuff. But what do you do in case of a cyber attack? All right, your DR plan. So as I mentioned, the first thing we did was we yanked the network cable to stop the spread. Limiting the blast radius is the first thing you should be thinking about, right? Shouldn't be thinking about how do I get the files back, shouldn't be thinking about should I pay the ransom or not. Yank the cable, turn off the machine, stop the spread, okay? Second thing, confirm if it's spread or not. So if you're using an endpoint detection tool, that's going to help you confirm whether or not other endpoints have been infected, right? Otherwise, it may be a laborious process depending on how many endpoints you're managing. Collecting digital forensics, right? So evidence to work with local authorities, right? And then identifying and remediating the root cause of the compromise, right? So this is kind of after the fact when we're saying, okay, how did this bad actor get in? Oh, we had an open port on our network that someone was able to go through and get in, right? Well, we need to close that port or limit access to those who only need it. So just identifying what that root cause was, how you were exploited, and making sure you close that loop. And then restoring the data from the backup, right? Talked a lot. So a lot of the work that happens after an attack is really contingent on how well prepared you are. And this is the part that I'm really most passionate about, is planning for disaster recovery. Obviously, I'm talking about ransomware, and this is all relevant to ransomware, but a disaster recovery plan is relevant to any disaster. And you have to know how you're going to recover. One of the things I stress the most when I talk about this is that a DR plan doesn't end. It's not something I write down and then shove away. It's a flywheel like you see here. Every part leads into each other, and there's a really important reason for that. Bad actors are going to change their methods. We've seen this from back when Backblaze was hit to today. Even though phishing is still the most common way folks get in, it is not the only way. And these phishing attempts are getting more and more sophisticated. I actually got one today. What was it? It was for a Greek food place that is a local chain where I live, saying, oh, if you want to continue getting your rewards points, make sure you update your password. And that's one of the strategies they use, is to give you like this carrot, like, oh, don't miss out on this. Make sure you're able to do that. I mean, this is a chain, a local chain where I live in California with maybe like 8 locations. And I got a phishing attempt literally today, trying to get me to give them my password. So it's a lot more sophisticated. You really have to understand how folks are trying to get at you. And again, there's a lot of great resources, from the government and other places that can give you the most up-to-date information and the things that you should be thinking about. So adapting and evolving. A DR plan should constantly adapt and evolve. We have to change as those who are attacking us are changing, right? It is essentially a foregone conclusion that at some point your organization will lose data. So it's super important to have a DR plan in place. You may also need this if you're applying for cyber insurance, or if you have cyber insurance today. We hear this a lot from folks that come to us trying to fulfill these cyber insurance requirements, that a DR plan is necessary. So not only is it a good thing to do, you may actually have to do it, right? And a DR plan is never fully done, as I mentioned. Threats change, we have to change with them. So one way we can do that, we think, is by using Backblaze Computer Backup. I think a good backup software is going to cover all the data that you need and be deployed across the organization. After that ransomware attack, Backblaze deployed Jamf within our ecosystem, we are Jamf customers, to ensure that we are able to maintain our backups and keep our backup solutions and endpoint detections up to date and standard across the company. So you need to have comprehensive coverage, right? Total coverage across your fleet. Rapid restore capabilities, right? The more downtime that you have when recovering from a disaster, that's more time and money that's lost. So it's really important to be able to restore in a quick fashion. Administrative control, right? Ensuring that you're using those laws of least privilege, making sure admins are able to get their users back up and running, and then that advanced security part I just talked about. Okay. Matt, you want to do some talking? Everyone awake?
Here we go. So in this journey that Backblaze took in regards to getting hit by ransomware and then doing an analysis and review of what exactly happened, what's my investigation look like and the results look like, then you start looking at, okay, how do I go through an execution of using my management tools, possibly security tools, which I'll talk about next, to make sure that you all are successful in limiting the capabilities of a ransomware or malware. And so the first things that Backblaze did was the utilization of Jamf Pro, but to execute 4 main functions for their environment on a post-ransomware type of situation. So we decided to draw together 4 unique areas that would be my suggestion to all of you. First, go and set up and deploy, remediate, and audit some form of a compliance benchmark. If you all saw in the keynote, we are very excited about the compliance benchmarks coming to Jamf Pro. I am one of the authors of the Jamf Compliance Editor here at Jamf that helps instigate the macOS Security Compliance Project into the Jamf Pro tool so that it's really easy for all of you to find a security benchmark like CIS, NIST, DISASTIG, and others that you can go and say, okay, here's what happened, how the ransomware got in, how we reviewed our investigation to determine these security controls are what I want to implement across all of my Macs, my iPhones, my iPads, and soon Vision OS as well. So you'll go through the process of reviewing each one of the controls. Then you go through a proper review and testing internally to see what is the impact, first of all, to user productivity. Will this, in fact, hinder us to the point that we're no longer productive at all? So if that's the case, you start to wean that off. And then as you wean, you get to the point of understanding, okay, this is what I need to deploy. And not only deploy, you get to use this standard, this compliance standard, and as Troy mentioned, you take it over to your cybersecurity vendor of choice and state, listen, here's what I'm doing. Here's the compliance measurements I'm now enforcing on all of my endpoints. This is how we've secured our environment from a management perspective. So that's the first recommendation, so that you can get compliance measurements installed on every endpoint. And in essence, that's hardening your environment. That is the 4th point, but I'll get back to that in a moment. The second one, advanced reporting with automations. This gets to an environment with Jamf Pro if you haven't gotten to the point of building out advanced computer searches or advanced mobile device searches. And as you build these reports, what you may not know is that there's a couple of additional automation techniques. One, you can set up an email and say, hey, I need this report emailed every week to my compliance officer. For they must know, here's all of the endpoints that we are seeing. These are all the endpoints that have checked in this week to make sure that operating system has been updated. All of the apps have been updated. In fact, here's the app vulnerability report. You get all of that emailed out, and it's not just for IT. My suggestion would be you get it over to InfoSec, you get it over to your compliance teams, and that way they understand the risk, the total risk to your organization. Then, also, look into webhooks as well. So if you look and build out like a smart computer group or a smart mobile device group, you can say, hey, in this particular case, I see Backblaze has not checked in or backed up in over 12 hours, and report that back to Jamf Pro, and then you can submit a webhook that says, hey, send this notification over to Teams or Slack and let this team know there's some activity here that might be causing risk if we get in a malware attack. Because if your Backblaze has not been backed up, That's a significant issue. So definitely review that from an automation standpoint. The third point on this slide is third-party integrations. I don't know how many, I love interaction, so if you guys don't mind, some of you are falling asleep. So Microsoft device compliance. How many have started implementing that with Jamf Pro? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, good. Okay, what about Google Beyond Corp integration? 3 or 4 more. Okay, that's fine. Good. So when you get to this, this is part of that third-party integration component that I want to instill, that you review what's happening on the Jamf marketplace. If you haven't been there, it's marketplace.jamf.com. It's also, I believe it's where Backblaze is too. I don't know. Yes, no, don't know. Okay, so Microsoft, Google, Beyond Corp, what happens with these integrations is you get to state, okay, if they're not meeting compliance, if Backblaze hasn't been backed up in over 24 hours, block their access to all Microsoft tooling. That's what the device compliance with Microsoft does. Same process, except at the end with Google. So Google Beyond Corp, same thing. You say, hey, listen, they're just not able to access the Google Workspace today. So definitely look at third-party integrations, and that also helps you stop the spread. Last of all, harden the environment. So a portion of hardening is compliance. Great. Got that checked off? The next portion of this, though, is hardening the environment as far as making sure that you can even use Jamf tools for distributing employee knowledge sessions, like he was mentioning with phishing test, with various components of making sure you're testing the user landscape, you're testing the network landscape. Harden the environment around your Apple devices so that it feels comfortable that you are, in fact, validating the user at all times, validating that they're on the right device at all times, and then last of all, should they be on the network getting access to this corporate resource at all times. That's how you harden the environment so that you're more comfortable in honestly going to your cybersecurity insurance provider and saying, here's my entire security plan. Please authorize this. Please give me ransomware coverage, whatever you need to do there. So all of that. The last component would be the highest recommendation is, as he mentioned, he talked about EDR tools. He talked about phishing blocking protection. Definitely review, if you haven't already, look at Jamf's entire platform. Jamf Protect, as one example, he talked about it. In case you're not aware, in the IBM latest security report, it states that phishing is the largest component of this, and it attacks at an average rate globally of 15% of all cyber attacks. And so that amounts to millions of loss and damage every year. Jamf Protect currently has assessed 197 billion websites globally, and we are now blocking 123,000 phishing sites, and so that you all can protect your endpoints. That's one example. This is not a Jamf Protect demo or presentation, so we're not going to talk further about that. Our goal being is that you look at the ecosystem that Jamf is building out so that you all can protect your environment better. And so that's more of the story of the Backblaze with Jamf and how we got to this point of presenting to you all today. Troy?
Thank you, sir. Do I need this? Probably not. I don't know. Is there a cool animation? There is. So you can be prepared with Backblaze and Jamf, as it says. So now we have a few minutes left here. I didn't talk too much, thank goodness. So if anyone is still awake, we'd be happy to take some questions, both myself or Matt, that you have around Jamf or Backblaze. Looks like we got one over there. Oh yeah, that mic doesn't work, huh?
Israel's going to run around with the mic.
Yeah.
Does that one work? Well, we're going to test. Go ahead and go to the QR code. Okay. We'll repeat your question. Go ahead. And then here we go. So there's a few components. One is to just fully recognize integration components are actually still getting built out between us. That's one. But it doesn't take away from Jamf Pro's extension attribute capabilities, where when you have a scriptable nature on a macOS endpoint, you can say, hey, has Backblaze done this backup? That's one example that I was giving to you was, hey, if it hasn't backed up for 24 hours, go and build a smart computer group in Jamf Pro so that you can take action in response to that. That's a portion of the integration, but beyond that, we're going to continue looking at like API-based integrations. And if Jamf Blaze, bam, you notice that? That was integrating names. So what you'll do with the Backblaze component of it is maybe if something is happening, the Backblaze agent sees a component of it, what we would love to see is an API endpoint trigger to be happening back to Jamf Pro so that further components can be built out. So that's a future that we would love to see with this, but great question.
Yeah. Excellent. I'll just also point out that, obviously we have our own reporting, right? And where that reporting ends up in is a bucket. So in addition to computer backup, Backblaze also does cloud storage. And every week, we're going to drop this reporting of your computer's backups into a bucket. So potentially, that we also support webhooks. We could use webhooks to talk to Jamf based on certain factors, right? We can read the report and have it kick off automations based on if a backup has failed or not. So we're really starting to think about all the really cool things we can do here. But I hope that helps answer your question. Excellent. We have another one and a working mic?
Yeah.
Excellent.
I'll be right here.
I guess I'll go. Sorry. It's all good. So Troy, you mentioned that, after ransomware events, people get kind of, oh my God, what happened? So I'm interested to know if after this particular incident, did you notice that there was an uptick in, what you saw as potential threats afterwards?
Oh my gosh, yes. So that's a really, really good question. So I'll tell you, I've been at Backblaze for almost 10 years now. And I mentioned an example earlier, like having most of the company have access to internal systems, right? Never really thought much of that. And I thought, oh man, hey, it's helpful for me to go in and see someone's billing history if I have to help solve a billing problem, right? But after this event, it kind of made me rethink some of these like system access problems that I identified as vulnerabilities. In the past, I thought, yeah, I like having as much access as possible. But then I started to think about how much do I really need to do my job, right? Aren't there other people whose main job is to interact with these systems? And I think in a lot of orgs, especially where it's like 2, 3 people are like your IT admins, right? Thinking about who really needs access is really important, and limiting the scope that you're able to get potentially phished or socially engineered, right? I always kind of thought, oh yeah, I'm smarter than that stuff, right? And someone I really, Ellie, it's not that I don't think she's smart. She very much is someone I very much respect. And she fell for something because it was the end of the day. She was worried about, hey, do I need to take this voicemail from QuickBooks, right? To do her job. And it really got me thinking about, man, like we're all really vulnerable, no matter how smart we think we are, or how much we think we're great at picking out phishing emails or whatever it is. We're all vulnerable. And limiting access, I think, was the biggest thing for me that really opened my eyes to make sure that, hey, in the future, I'm going to be okay, or not be okay, but potentially limit the spread and the entry points for bad actors. So, yeah, thank you for the question.
Anyone else?
We got one up here.
So having good backups is important, but some of these perpetual people that are doing this are sitting there for 2 or 3 months before they actually activate their attack. Is there anything in your backup that would filter or check or help prevent that? Because if you pull a backup that's already infected, you're not going to clear anything out.
Yeah. So, Matt, I think that falls more in your realm, right?
I think he's asking about backup.
Oh, you're asking about back. Yeah.
What happens to the Backblaze server? Is there anything on your servers that scan for viruses?
Yeah, good question. So today, that's not something that we do. We don't offer detection of ransomware. We are only doing backup of files, right? So we really think that Backblaze should be partnered with something that specializes in that kind of anomaly detection, right? Because you are right. If you were just having Backblaze as a solution, there's nothing in there that's going to tell you, oh, this backup from 2 months ago was the infected part, because you're right. That's one of the methods that attackers are getting more sophisticated, is they're burying themselves for a while. I will say one of the advantages of Backblaze, a computer backup, is that we don't back up system files and we don't back up applications. And a lot of those places are the places where bad actors are going to go to do things, right, to root themselves within. Not to say, I mean, I've seen plenty of doc files that end up being, Trojan horses there, but while we're not doing true scanning of the files, there is a little bit of protection there, but that is a great point, and really drives home the need for some kind of detection on your endpoint. The question was, are the backups encrypted? The answer is yes. They are encrypted with 256-bit keys. And you can set your own private encryption keys that Backblaze does not hold for added security. Question in the back from Natasha.
And we have 2 minutes until we wrap up. So we'll probably wrap up with Natasha.
Troy, does Backblaze have any type of version history that would help protect for that ransomware that might be sleeping for 3 months?
Yes, Backblaze by default keeps 1 year of file version histories, and that's unlimited. So you could have 100 versions of a file within 6 months, and each one of those versions of the file is going to be in Backblaze for a year. We also offer an option for what we call forever history, where we will keep literally every version of a file for the entirety of the time that you have a Backblaze subscription. Does that answer your question? Oh, I get a thumbs up.
Can I expand upon that? So that's actually it's a great leading question for me, so thank you, Natasha. So what you'll see, going back to your scenario, if you don't mind, sir, what I would see in a scenario like this is when implementing something like Jamf Protect to review behavior analytics of a particular environment, and you receive, for example, a notification that, hey, though we didn't see this 0 day on the exact implementation of this particular version or hash of a particular file, we now have proper notification that this was the hash that was infected. That's the way I would actually take this version history in that course of action and grab out of Jamf Protect a hash and say, okay, how far back does this version of this file do exist? And now you have proper timing and scale. And when you have a hash, you get to go into Backblaze and start reviewing every other backup scenarios and say, okay, does this hash exist elsewhere? So then you can start understanding scale in that fashion. So that's just a very quick off-the-cuff solution that I came up with. So,
Fantastic. We are at the top of the hour. I'd like for all of you to put your hands together for Troy and Matt. Fantastic session. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for attending.